Why practical UC security matters. Let's talk about the importance of security features in a UC environment. Here is the agenda. Let's discuss threats to the UC environment, security and complexity, and a basic scenario to be used along this course. Today, it is not a matter of if you are going to be attacked, it's a matter of when. Attacks against the UC environment are increasing all over the world, and we have organizations like FTC, FCC, and IETF attempting to provide some assistance. Let's look at a few numbers of threats against the UC environment. Robocalls. Americans got around 58.5 billion robocalls in 2019, which is 22% increase from 2018. Shadow IT. 83% of organizations say employees are using apps not approved by the IT. Let's see some common threats to the environment, to the UC environment. Eavesdropping, listening to someone else's conversation and usually not for the best of intentions. Call spoofing, placing a call while changing the caller ID to impersonate another user to gain access to the information. Robocalling, use a robot to auto-dial and deliver pre-recorded messages, usually used by scammers. Voice phishing, making calls that are intended to obtain personal or financial information about the individual. Telephony denial of services, DDoS, denying valid users to access the UC environment. Media tampering, hijacking a voice or video session to challenge the integrity of the session. Toll fraud is the unauthorized use of the UC environment to make long distance calls charged to you or your organization. Session replay replace a legitimate recorded voice or video call to use with the bad intention. Okay? All right. The next subject is security and complexity. As security features are enabled to mitigate threats, there is a risk of the system becoming more complex to troubleshoot or operate. Well, isolating your EC environment from the outside world is not an option. So we need to implement security controls to protect our environment and understand the complexity of each control brings to our environment to troubleshooting and operate our environment. Let's talk about conventional thinking. And here we have two examples of conventional thinking. Let's say it's an old way, an old-fashioned implementation where we had the sub-optional security implementation in the UC environment. Disable or minimize security features. There is no more room to deploy a UC environment with the security features disabled or minimize it to reduce the complexity of the implementation, right? So let's not set the account manager to mixed mode because we need to restart a few services or we need to sign the certificates or things like that. We do need to apply some security features because it's part of the best practice. Patch policy. Also, there is no policy to, usually organization does not have a policy to patch the account manager or apply the latest firmware in the phone. So that need to be applied. That need to be part of your implementation. Your organization need to have a patch policy. So as soon as Cisco release a new firmware or a new OS patch or OS driver, let's keep your system up to date. Practical UC security is not all or nothing approach. We have organizations concerned about the performance and the interoperability after enabling security features in the UC environment. And we need to understand how each security control affects our environment to find a good balance of operations and security. So let's say you want to encrypt the voice calls, but when your system needs to talk with a third-party solution, like another PBX or call recording or something like that, you have concerns about how the encryption will work. So you don't have to decide to, oh, let's not apply the encryption. You need to decide, let's apply the encryption and mitigate the impacts. So we know that calls between Cisco device or call to the PSTN will be encrypted, but calls to this specific server or this specific solution will not be encrypted. So you need to have a good balance. You cannot just decide not implement, not enable a security feature because of interoperability or performance. You do need to be concerned about performance and interoperability, but you cannot decide to let's not implement because you don't know well the impacts. So in security is not optional anymore. Security should be part of your implementation. All right. So we talk about threats to the UC environment and security and complexity. And before moving to the next session, we have the last topic. Let's talk about the scenario that we will use as reference in our course. Okay, so we will talk about in our course. Let's say we have a company called CR Health, is the healthcare provider, and there is a single location and the local PSTN, and we are gonna have a Cisco Call Manager 12.5, a Cisco Unit Connection 12.5, a Cisco IMP 12.5, Cisco CMS, and a PSTN gateway. All right, so we talked about threats to the UC environment, security and complexity, a basic scenario to be used along the course, and we are ready to go to the next session. And here we have I'm leaving some reference that I put in the presentation. So if you want to see about the robocalls and the shadow IT, okay? Next session is about physical security and life safety. See you there.